Lupin the Third Part 3 is the third Lupin animated TV series airing from March 1984 to December 1985. Broadcast on Yomiuri TV, the same channel that aired Part 1 years ago, it ran on a sometimes weekly basis for nearly 2 years, with 50 episodes fully produced and broadcast. With Lupin donning a snazzy pink jacket and the show overall drenched in a more vibrant, flashier art style, Part 3 is emblematic of the era it was produced in, being the first Lupin media to debut right in the middle of the 1980s. It is often considered a bit of a black sheep in the Lupin family, or at least the TV shows, as many label it as being the silliest, most cartoonish, and overall least cool Lupin. Some within the Lupin fandom frown on Part 3 as they believe it dips too far into childish territory in both the storytelling and animation, a legacy that, in all honesty, is very unfair. After the cancellation of Lupin VIII, TMS was looking to create a new Lupin TV project, and fortunately, there was an offer on the table. Apparently, Yomiuri TV was experiencing great success with Part 1 in reruns and wanted TMS to make a new series for them. TMS accepted and brought on a number of both new and old staff to work on the project. Yuzo Aoki, an animator on Parts 1 and 2, took the role of character designer and animation director this time around, more or less becoming the show's overall director as well. In addition, Junichi Ioka, a story editor for the Detective Conan series, who also worked on Lupin Part 2 and would act as a script producer / supervisor for many Lupin TV specials, worked on the series composition. A number of writers came on board as well, including Lupin veterans Atsushi Yamatoya and Yutaka Kaneko, the latter returning from the cancelled Lupin VIII project, Beyblade and Pokemon movie writer Hideki Sonoda, Lupin TV special writer Hiroshi Kashiwabara, Lupin Part 2 writer Yoshi Urusawa, film director Seijin Suzuki, Ultraman writer Yasushi Hirano, and Ashita no Naja series composer / writer Tomoko Kanparu, noteworthy for being, to my knowledge, one of the first women to work on the Lupin series. Although please, let me know if there are others who worked on projects I've already covered, I'd love to hear about them. Yomiuri TV wanted something more in the style of Part 1 rather than Part 2, which, as a reminder, was produced with rival studio Nippon TV, and asked that the red jacket from Part 2 not return. It's rumored that Yuzo Aoki suggested Lupin wear a white jacket instead of Monkey Punch's preferred red jacket, but this was ultimately rejected. The story goes that TMS compromised to meet somewhere in the middle of white and red, and thus, the pink jacket was born. In an effort to help Part 3 create its own identity and allow the animators to put their own individual spins on Lupin, Aoki created numerous different character designs that could be alternated with depending on the story. A harder look for more serious storylines, a softer look for less serious storylines, and a cartoonish look for more, well, cartoonish storylines. Aoki described it as a Neapolitan ice cream approach, where you could pick the exact style you wanted depending on your mood, though by the second half of the show's run, the harder style was abandoned in favor of going simpler and wackier with the designs and artwork. Later episodes especially went further away from the rigid looks, constantly featuring off-model frames and less intricate designs. Likely this don't focus on making it look spectacular mindset was put in place to help the Part 3 staff also work on Legend of the Gold of Babylon, the Lupin movie developed alongside Part 3. But that's for the next video. Part 3 debuted on Yomiuri TV in March 1984 and, at least initially, was a success.
よー元気かい今晩やらかそうと思ってる事件は何かこっそり教えちゃおうかなでもな見ての楽しみって言うじゃん今晩待ってるぜ
It's sometimes said that this show wasn't very popular at the time of its broadcast, but that's not true. TMS originally planned to only release 2 cores of 26 total episodes, but after the show was proving to be a hit, it extended its run by 2 more cores to bring the episode count to 52. However, its Wednesday at 7 p.m. time slot meant that broadcasts would often be pushed back for weeks in favor of baseball games, award shows, and other special presentations. Because these delays often affected Part 3's ratings, its episode run would ultimately be cut down to 50, and technically that's including 2 filler episodes that aired much later in 1985. Tonally, it didn't exactly match either Part 1 or Part 2, and instead went in its own direction, or should I say, directions. When I think of this show's tone, a number of words come to mind, with a few being bold, colorful, playful, and inconsistent. It's a more adult work than Part 2 overall, focusing less on the crazy antics of that show and bringing back some of the mature edge from Part 1. There's far more nudity, for instance, the most of any show we've seen so far in this retrospective, even if it's still nowhere near the level of the manga. But the show still has that high-spirited, sometimes crazy mood that you expect from Lupin, though often the hijinks come from the way Lupin and the crew handle a situation rather than the situation itself being ridiculous. It's honestly very similar in structure to Part 2, and any major differences really boil down to the individual stories and not the overall mission statements of the projects being dissimilar. Obviously, the animation is a lot brighter in its color palette, which we'll discuss in a bit, but Part 3 brings Lupin firmly into the 1980s with a strong sense of that era's overall style and attitude. It's nowhere near as on the finger of pop culture as Part 2 was, but it definitely takes a lot of inspiration from the time period in terms of visuals and setting. Strangely, a lot of the stories take place in the Americas and the United States specifically, and more often than not, it's set in New York or an unnamed New York pastiche. I wouldn't call this a unifying theme, however. It's honestly as much a show about the US as Part 5 is about France, and it's more just an observation rather than something with a deeper meaning about the show itself. But it's the feeling of unpredictability that really sticks out to me. Like Part 2, this show is very up and down in quality regarding the stories, characterizations, animations, and designs, and it makes it tricky to figure this show out sometimes. On one hand, even at its worst, it never really goes anywhere lower than Part 2's sour points, but on the other hand, its high points don't reach the peaks of everything that's come before it. So what we're left with is a series that's just as erratic in quality as Part 2, but is never quite as good. If you watch this show in a bubble without considering the other shows, it's not a bad watch, and will probably satisfy you provided you understand the show's tone and animation approach beforehand, but comparing it to Parts 1 and 2 just makes it, in my eyes, a little underwhelming. But I'll give this show credit, no matter how good or bad an episode ends up being, it never backs down from the story it wants to tell, even if that story is incredibly strange, and to be sure, Part 3 has some of the most bizarre plots in all of Lupin. This is the show where Lupin and Fujiko have straight up telepathic powers, where a man can dodge any attack because a bullet in his brain is lodged against his optic nerve, and where a dolphin falls in love with Lupin to the point of wanting to marry him. It can get downright baffling, and to be fair, this was true of Part 2 as well, but here it seems just that little bit more ludicrous. I'm not necessarily complaining for the record, because as outlandish as Part 3 can get, there's never a point where you think the team was phoning it in. Rewatching it for this video, I was struck with how seriously it takes its premises, whether they're going in a silly or dramatic direction. The show commits to whatever kind of narrative it wants to tell, and even when the premise of an episode is weak, that mindset is commendable. On the character front, Part 3 mostly continues in the tradition of the previous shows, with some adjustments to match the mood of this series. Lupin is a little more lecherous here, the most adult version of this character we've seen depicted on television since the Osumi era of Part 1. While he's still nowhere near as skeevy as the manga or Mystery of Mamo, his sexual desires are certainly more present here than in Part 2. But this isn't his only personality trait, as he maintains the calm, collected, aloof but never outright stupid characterization of his other incarnations, achieving a nice blend between heroism and hedonism. Jigen and Goemon definitely feel more like bit players this time around, however, often being there more for support while occasionally getting the spotlight when the story suits them. Jigen's crankiness and woman-hating traits have been downplayed a bit, and he's overall a more passive character, really only being around for exposition or plot reasons rather than developing his own character. Same with Goemon, as while he does appear in most episodes, he's rarely ever the focus and often takes a back seat to the others. Whenever they are the highlight of a scene or episode, it's usually a nice treat, but these moments are fleeting. Surprisingly, the breakout character in this show for me is Fujiko, whom I definitely didn't appreciate when watching this show for the first time. Despite following pretty close to her Part 2 characterization and not doing a ton differently, I actually really liked watching Fujiko in this one, as she feels more multidimensional this time. It's a great balance of her usual traits while also not putting her in the damsel in distress role too often, giving her more confidence in her abilities and allowing her to drive the plot forward more often. Then of course we've got Zenigata, still the same dedicated, passionate pops we all know and love, though he doesn't go nearly as insane here as he does in Part 2. He's less of a schemer and more of a traditional pursuer, letting the core Lupin crew handle the crazy side of things this time. For the style that the writers and animators were going for with Part 3, this version of Zenigata makes perfect sense. But let's talk about the animation, something that's often brought up regarding this show for better or for worse. Just from a movement perspective, the animation itself is pretty good, a step above Part 2 in many ways, and while I can't show you this just through these stills, it looks very good in motion. Sometimes it can even save an episode with a bad plot, or at least make it easier to swallow. It is still clearly a television anime, with issues like poor background syncing and even, in some rare instances, repeated animation through different episodes, but it's certainly the nicest moving Lupin show so far. I don't know if Part 3 had a higher budget, but if it did, it definitely shows in the body movements. But animation and art style are two different things, and the latter is something I'm more heavily mixed on. There's some great things here like the brighter color palettes, especially noticeable in the character designs and outfits, but also present in the environments. Just in terms of the shows, Part 3 has the best backgrounds of the shows so far, and it's awesome seeing how all these bright hues never get too visually annoying or distracting. The lighting is also far more dynamic, playing more with shadows and reflection to make some scenes really stick out. But other aspects like the character designs just drag it down, as while I've got a soft spot for the harder looks the early episodes showed off, once it gets to the softer, squishier visual styles, I start to lose interest. They're expressive and fluid, sure, but often they don't match the seriousness of the plot lines or the intended tone of the current scene, creating a heavier sense of mood whiplash than any Lupin media before this show. The problem with the character designs can vary wildly depending on the specific animator, with some being alright to look at but others just looking downright ugly. In the majority of cases, I'm able to look past this issue and enjoy the show for what it is, but in crafting a critical lens on Lupin through this retrospective, I felt this show definitely took a hit in the art department, especially in the latter half where it goes all out on the looser designs. Anyway, this is the first Lupin TV series to be broadcast entirely in stereo sound, which helps make the audio really pop. The previous shows did just fine with their mono audio tracks, but the modern presentation really does wonders for both the sound effects and music. Yuji Ono returns as the composer, but because Nippon TV owned the Part 2 soundtracks, Ono couldn't use any compositions from that show, including the iconic Lupin theme. The replacement opening song is Sexy Adventure, composed by Ono and performed by Yosuke Nakamura, which is a decent little tune on its own and fitting for the show even if it pales in comparison to Ono's Lupin theme. I'll admit though, the ending theme, Fairy Night, composed by Ono and performed by Sonia Rosa, is one I find pretty boring even if the instrumentation is easy on the ears. That problem extends to the rest of the music as well, as it overall ranks fairly low for me compared to Ono's other Lupin soundtracks. His unique touch is apparent, and there's some great tracks here, but I find the compositions less interesting to listen to even if they provide a satisfying background to the action most of the time. Still, on the whole, I would argue that Part 3 is still worth a look if you're planning to go through the Lupin series, but not so much if you have a more casual interest in the franchise. It's a fine enough representation of Lupin on its own, and should you start your Lupin journey here, which I don't recommend personally, you'd probably be entertained. It's not going to be for everyone though, and with how comical and peculiar it can get, I can understand why it has a number of detractors. But for those looking to really get into Lupin and who want to explore the series through its history, Part 3 is definitely worth checking out. I think this show is long overdue for a critical reevaluation, as it would be great for it to escape the labels that many dismiss it for, and for more people to appreciate it on its own merits. I definitely discovered a newfound appreciation for Part 3 when making this video, and I don't believe it deserves to be cast aside just because it sometimes goes in a weird direction. And with the Lupin TV shows, I'm listing my favorite episodes that you definitely want to hit up if you're looking to watch a selection of stories, and I want to highlight 16 episodes from Part 3. As a disclaimer, I watched this show via the Discotheque Blu-ray for this video, which does make a difference as the subtitles have been cleaned up compared to the versions on sites like Crunchyroll, just to keep that in mind. Anyway, here's my top adventures from Part 3. 1. The Gold Ingot Summon Lupin. A fairly basic, but well-executed opener to the series, plenty of good gags, action and suspense, all centered around an enjoyable treasure, although it kinda leaves off without a real ending, something that a lot of Part 3 episodes, even the best ones, tend to do. 2. Expose the Big Trap. Of course it's a Zenigata episode, so it naturally appeals to me, but seeing him as the lone warrior this time, with Lupin staying in the shadows, just gives him even more time to shine, and it's fun seeing a scheme to make our favorite inspector take the fall unfold. 6. Lupin Travels by Tank. Part 3 doesn't focus on the other members of Lupin's gang as much, but this is an awesome episode for Jigen, and a great look into his past with a good character of the week in Captain Galanko, and some solid Lupin shenanigans on the side to fill in the gaps. 8. St. Mary's Great Escape. This one's a little bit too similar to the Part 1 episode, Who Had the Last Laugh, plus the manga chapter it's based on, but it's still an incredible adventure with a great sense of thrills, suspense, comedy, and adventure all rolled into a really fun package. 12. Prisoners in Baltan's Mansion. There's a lot of Cagliostro vibes here, with a young woman whom Lupin knows from his past, and an insane older man running a forgery scheme in a lopsided tower, but it stands out enough on its own to warrant a watch even in this condensed form. 16. The Poisonous Golden Apple. While the first half does drag a bit, the second half involving Lupin and a bunch of marathon runners is absolutely ridiculous in the best way possible. It's an instance of Part 3's focus on insane premises paying off in the long run. No pun intended. 23. Operation Beirut Mobile Bank Robbery. Not every absurd Lupin premise works for me, but this one takes a fun idea that obviously wouldn't work in the real world and plays it seriously enough to not spoil the concept, and beyond that, it's a pretty fun heist with some good tension. 24. Sleep peacefully, friend. Goemon rarely stands out in Part 3, but not only is this episode one of the best in the series, it's a fantastic story for our beloved samurai that puts him in a compromised position when he has to face off against an old friend who is his equal, leading to a great finale. 26. A Ghost in New York. Even if the designs and animations are a bit too much in this episode, I can ignore that when the action unfolds in such an engaging manner with excellent pacing, a fun treasure of the week, and characters with a nice backstory that makes this episode a good time. 31. A turnabout, a comeback, and a reversal. It's a solid heist with some great animation, and, for the most part, a good role for Fujiko, using her feminine charm to get what she wants. Even if the story isn't spectacular and the treasure isn't very unique, it doesn't make the episode any less fun. 35. The Prey Amid the Snow. Set mostly in one location, this is a nice game of back and forth between Lupin, a rival thieves couple, their boss, and Zenigata, making for a fairly intense watch where, even if you can guess what's happening, it's still exciting seeing everyone figure out the situation. 37. Pops boils over with rage. Even if the plot's a little too similar to the woman Pops fell in love with from Part 2, it is still a great episode, and it's interesting seeing how far Zenigata is willing to push things, becoming a genuine threat to Lupin's life and never backing down until the end. 40. A Lotto Ticket to Riot. I'll admit that I really don't like the character designs here as it gets too erratic between shots for me, but somehow it manages to be a very entertaining episode with plenty of hijinks and fun despite a pretty uninteresting treasure, and Pops once again takes the cake. 41. A Night Under Martial Law. Part 3 usually doesn't focus on political struggles in its plots, but this is one of the exceptions, and a very intriguing episode with somewhat of a focus on Jigen and Goemon above the rest of the crew, and creating a solid amount of suspense. 46. Soaring on Scrap Wings. I love the premise, stranding Lupin, Jigen, and Goemon on an island where they build a plane out of scraps to escape in a very MacGyver-esque way, ironically a few months before that show premiered, and there's plenty of amazing shenanigans spawned from that crazy idea. And 49. The Day Pops Got Adopted. The title alone piques your interest from the start, but there's a ton of fantastic Lupin antics, gadgets, and action scenes, and a great focus on Zenigata as a burden for both Lupin and the ones he's trying to help. A very fun episode to end this string on. So that's the essential 16 episodes to watch if you're looking for a selection from Part 3 to try out. And of course, here's 8 runner-up episodes to bring it to an even 24 if you're looking to make it a whole season's worth. Watching this show again definitely opened my eyes to a lot of its redeeming qualities, and even though I still personally put it towards the lower end of my Lupin TV show tier list, it is still a worthwhile entry in the franchise and a solid show overall. Now, I typically don't advocate that you buy physical releases over streaming, as not everyone has the desire or resources to support a physical collection, but for Part 3, at least if you live in North America, I emphatically recommend the Blu-ray release by Discotek. It has all 50 episodes in superb video quality, of course, but the real reason is, as I mentioned, the improved subtitles. See, on streaming platforms, you'll often be forced to deal with fan subs that lose a lot of the nuance and spirit of the Japanese script. It's how I first experienced Part 3, and it's definitely part of the reason why I didn't like it that much back then. Discotek included a brand new set of English subtitles that make for a vast improvement, making this the definitive way to watch Part 3 if you want to check it out. Currently, there's no English dub for this show though, so if you're strictly a dubs person, you're unfortunately out of luck. Part 3 would be the last Lupin show for a while, as the franchise wouldn't see another weekly series until 2012. Lupin didn't fully leave the realm of television, however, as starting in 1989, there'd be a yearly special starring our favorite gang of thieves. But before we get to those, we have a feature film and OVA to cover, the former of which was created by many of the staff working on Part 3. Considered a companion movie to this show, it serves as the last hurrah for the Pink Jacket, and that movie, 1985's Legend of the Gold of Babylon, is the next stop on our journey. For now, if you enjoyed this video, then give it a like, leave a comment, and be sure to subscribe and click that bell to be notified when new videos go live. What's your take on Part 3 if you've seen it before, and are you considering giving it another look? Let me know in the comments. Until then, this is Cloud Connection, signing off.